Very happy to have you. So, what we'll be talking about a bit about today is the topic of feminist leadership for climate justice. To those of you who are new to our work, we've been working on bringing more of the voices of the grassroots, but also the voices of rethinking traditional climate change responses, and providing more of a safe space, especially for women that are working within this climate space. So we've been working on our project for coffee tables. So the past half year, we've been giving voice to the microphone to the voiceless. We've convened in dialogue among feminist leaders. We've facilitated networks and partnerships, and we've also connecting with the missing decision makers. So what we're here is to really bring the feminist leadership to the climate justice narrative. So who are we? We are all feminist leaders from the climate affected countries, but also from areas of displacement, where we all of us are passionate and committed to climate justice for all. And traditionally, our setting up today is really ahead of the COP28, where the COPs have traditionally been the platform for governments, international institutions, and organizations, but often also excluding of women and grassroots, such as ourselves. So our mission here today for the summit is really to provide a space of the missing stakeholders on the climate change tables, and also the high-level dialogue, and including of frontline actors in the decision-making process. So we hope by today with this summit, we can also bring you your voices, your input, and your thoughts and ideas with us for the COP, and also to have a great summit lineup. So over to you a bit, Anila, for an intro as well.
Thank you, Saran. Hi, everyone, and welcome. Myself, Anila Noor. I am Managing Director of New Women Connectors and part of many other refugee-led and women-led organizations. I'm super happy to have you all of here. Before we dive into the discussion today, I really want to request all of you, keep remembering why we need this kind of discussion. Being involved more than 2 decades in feminist leadership for the women's right, from gender equality, we felt global and especially Western center discussion, they are more focused on the problems and recommendation. But there's a very less opportunity where we really understand and address the root causes of this. That's the main purpose of this refugee, women-led, feminist-led discussion, where we are not only talking about the gaps, not only talking about the recommendation, but we are trying to showcase we are here to work with everyone as a partner, as our leaders, and we really need more flexible funding. We really need more trust, which we can do, and we not only need empowerment trainings, but we need more partnership. This is the main purpose of our discussion, and we are super happy to have so many people from around the globe. And when it's come to especially the climate discussion and the COP discussion, we felt we are not understanding how local communities from centuries, they are doing their resilience, their response when it's come to some change, when it's come to environment discussion, when it's come to recycling. So how we can understand their knowledge as knowledge. This is also a big gap. I'm super happy to have gather this discussion, and we are super thankful to all the partners who are joining us today and listening to us today, wherever you are. And we have an amazing moderator for this, which I'm super happy to have. And I hand over to Amina, and then Amina, over to you.
Many thanks, Anila. It's absolutely a joy and delight to be among so many wonderful and powerful women who are engaging in one of the most important topics of our times, and centering women at the heart of that conversation. May I just take the opportunity to also say thank you very much for giving me that opportunity to be able to moderate this very important dialogue that will take place in the next just under an hour and a half. The climate crisis is no longer gender neutral as we know it. And women and girls experience the greatest impact of climate change, which amplifies existing gender inequalities and poses unique threats to their livelihood, health, and safety. Across the world, women depend more on, yet have less to, natural resources. And this is really reminding us the importance of centering the conversation and having women at the heart of that engagement. So I'm very delighted. Before I just start the conversation, I'm gonna just pass the baton, as we call it, to Seyran, who will have a few words, and I'll take it from there. Over to you, Seyran.
Thank you so much. And I really feel such energy of all of you joining us. I feel the empowerment, the connection of having you all here. So for this session, I just wanted to remind everyone that this session will be recorded. So for any of you who, by any reason, would not want to be part of the recording, you're more than welcome to turn off your video or to join us. And we will be having our first panel session starting now, and we'll be following up with a second panel session. And towards the end, we will be very happy to have all of you join in for Q&A on the different topics, which we will have, and there will be opening space towards the end. So back to you, Amina, and ready to kick it off.
Many thanks. So as I reflect more on this topic, that women's capacity to cope with the effect of climate change is also hindered by their overall disadvantage. And as you will hear, so much of that will be highlighted in the dialogue taking place. They are overrepresented among the poor, face barriers to decision-making, experience disproportionate mobility challenges, and face unequal access to resources. Today, what we have is diverse, wonderful speakers who will speak to that. Just to give you a flow of what the next hour and a half will look like, we will have 6 incredible speakers with lived experience of climate change, as well as expertise and great knowledge on the topic. And we will have 2 sessions. The first session will focus on the transmission of knowledge, and second session will focus on sustainability and funding, which I know is not only crucial for all of us, but an absolute struggle. So without further ado, I would like to invite to the virtual floor our first speaker, Ambrym Salim, who is the founder and managing director at CoFe Feminist Network. She is also a researcher, a feminist, an activist, and a gender advocate, striving to contribute to efforts promoting epistemic and political and social justice. For those of you who are interested to have greater access to her profile, we will be more than happy to provide you with one. So over to you. And the question I would like you to reflect on is, look at how can we ensure that the knowledge of women working on the ground, feeling the consequence of climate change in their everyday life and finding resilient ways to adapt to it, and can be transmitted and valued on the decision-making levels.
Thank you, Amina, for a great introduction, and thank you, Seyran, for managing such a very crucial and needed summit at this time. The question you asked is very important, and it's directly related to my work, which is around politics of knowledge. And I would like to start by questioning what is knowledge, because you said that how can the knowledge be inclusive, and how can it inform the policy and the programs that are initiated to manage climate change, and how do they affect us? So I will depart with 2 points. First is the questioning the universality of knowledge. There is not just one knowledge. There are many knowledges, and there is knowledge everywhere. Each one of us has knowledge, and that is based on our lived experience. And this I will connect to my second point, which is on diversity of knowledges. So building on the diversity of knowledges that resides in each and every one of us, and based on our lived experience, I will say that this knowledge is important because it is contextual. What knowledge we have is what works for us. It is directly associated with our challenges. It arises from what have we experienced, but it also works for us because how we prepare for climate change, how we respond to effects of climate change, how we adapt to the outcomes of climate change, and how we show resilience as women. It all comes from our lived experience. So in this way, the knowledge that we have is very contextual, based on our on what we have been going through. We have been experiencing the climate change and its effects. For example, if there is extreme heat, how do we respond to it? As women, as the United Nations Environment Department states that there is 80% of the people affected by climate change are women. So if we are disproportionately affected by climate change, that means that we have more knowledge on how to respond, how to be prepared, and how to adapt to it. And I mean, research has shown, but also our everyday experiences show that women are more resilient. And in this way, I'll say that the viable solutions that would work also come from the ones who have been experiencing it the most. So the solutions reside and arise from our experiences. And coming to your question on how it should be taken to the decisions that are made. So I would say that our lived experience provide the most viable solutions to inform the policies, the programs, and the initiatives that are curated to respond to and to mitigate climate change. And one of the ways that we can do is to connect and communicate. I think it's very important to take our voices to the policy platforms like we're doing now, and so that our perspective informs the policies, programs, and initiatives that are made for us and affect us in many ways. Thank you.
Great start to an important dialogue. Many thanks, Ambreen. And absolutely, I really loved the fact that you reminded us all not only about the importance of a diversity of knowledge, but how that contributes to the way we address on issues around climate change, and also our lived experience. I think that for more women than men, we do absolutely underestimate the power of our lived experience. So really grateful that you've been able to emphasize on that and the importance that that brings to not just the conversation, but also in your last comment around finding the most viable solution when engaging with these key stakeholders. One of the things that I really would hope that this conversation will also bring is the importance of really looking at this discussion from an approach of bridging the gap between the sort of top-down approach and the bottom-up, and for us to be the middle women, not the middle men, but the middle women in that, and really contributing to the important solution that will be put forward collectively as we go forward. So I would now like to invite our second speaker. Whilst this centers the engagement of women's voices, I think it's really important that the support and also knowledge of men and those voices that need to be heard is also part of that. And with that said, I would like to invite Amir Al-Qaid. And Amir is an Irish Palestinian lawyer, an advocate, consultant, and a legal advisor and human rights activist. He's the co-founder and chairperson of the Global Refugee-Led Network, which many of us have had the privilege to be a part of. Mr. Amir, I'm delighted to also see you on my screen, so a huge warm welcome to you. You can get Amir's full bio also through our team if you're required to do so. But over to you, reflecting and thinking on the same question.
Thank you so much, Amina. Thank you, New Women Connectors, for inviting me to this very important and also very timely, sensitive webinar. My organization, the Global Refugee-Led Network, focuses on reflecting the voices of refugees from all over the globe, advocate for meaningful participation and engagements of refugees in the policy making in all decisions that affects their lives, whether it's at the national level, regional, or even global. The Global Refugee-Led Network pledged in 2019 on meaningful refugee participation, which means basically collecting commitments by states and other stakeholders in engaging refugees in policy making. As we all say, nothing about us without us. This reflects our challenging journey as refugees. We need our voices to be heard. Climate change is one of the main reasons for why people are on the move. Women often face higher risks and greater burdens from their impact of climate change in situations of poverty and due to existing roles, responsibilities, and sometimes cultural norms. For example, in many societies, women are responsible for household energy, food, water, and care for the young and the elderly. Across the world, women depend more on natural resources, most likely those natural resources that they don't even have access to or less access to. In many regions, women take huge responsibility for securing food, water, and fuel. Agriculture is the most important employment sector for women in low and lower middle income countries. During periods of erratic rainfall, women as agricultural workers work harder to secure income and resources for their families. This puts added pressure on girls who often have to even leave school to help their mothers manage the increased burden. From my experience and my advocacy journey in the last few years, I understood and I acknowledge that women voices has always been very effective. Women have the knowledge and the power to make a concrete change. While saying this, funding has been a great challenge. Further advocacy on funding for women refugee-led organizations and for women refugee leaders is crucial and a key to success. And back to you, Amina. Thank you.
Many thanks, Amir. And I'm sure as all the women who have joined us today in this very important dialogue would agree that having also a man centering in that conversation and acknowledging the huge impact that is global warming and climate change has on women, yet the acknowledgement that you've rightly made around the necessity of having women voices around is very much appreciated. It's also great that you brought in the conversation around the voices of refugee participation, which is again a huge missing element. I would like to take you back to the introduction of Miss Alina Noor, as she mentioned about the importance of our own presence in the current COP28 and what it would mean for us to be around that table, to be heard and to participate. So a huge thank you for your contribution. And last but not least, I would like to invite Miss Vidya Kanamala. Apologies if I mispronounce your surname, but I do find it beautiful. Miss Vidya is an associate at Equity Generation Lawyers, where she works with individuals and communities on climate-related litigation to defend their environmental, economic, social, and cultural rights. You could also engage with Miss Vidya further on her bio and her fantastic work through our team if you wish to. But as for now, last but not least, over to you.
Thanks, Amina. And thank you, Amir and Umbreen, for your wonderful presentations as well. So I'm dialing in from Australia, where it's sort of midnight. So please forgive me if I drop out of the call at some point. And also, Australia is a settler colonial state. So I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which I'm dialing in from, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. So I sort of reflected on this question, and I thought I might speak to it from the perspective of climate change litigation, which is sort of the bulk of my work, and how it intersects with, particularly with traditional owners and Indigenous people, right? Because a lot of those points around empowerment and around using those powerful voices that already exist and just bringing them to the table, or sort of using litigation as a tool to create space for those voices. So I might just get into that a little bit. So there's sort of two levels to the litigation piece. On the one hand, there is the legal process itself, which is, I think Umbreen made the point that knowledge isn't universal, and neither are legal systems, particularly in Australia, where there's hundreds of different Indigenous communities, and each of them have their own legal systems that go far back, possibly, further back than the common law system that is the sort of mainstream, I guess, legal system in Australia. And one thing we try and do in our work, and there's this incredible woman and leader, Casey Kickett, who talked about decolonizing the legal system at a conference recently. And one thing we often try to do is to find sort of a space between the Australian legal system and Indigenous legal systems where our Indigenous partners can bring forward cases or can interact with legal professionals such as judges or barristers or lawyers in a space that isn't entirely run by one particular knowledge system. So, for example, we recently represented a number of people from the Tiwi Islands, Tiwi Islanders who are Indigenous to these islands off the coast of the Northern Territory in Australia, whose rights are being directly affected by the development of an offshore gas project developed by Santos. We represented these a number of Tiwi Islanders in filing human rights grievances to a number of financial institutions who are involved in financing that project. And one of the things we said in our grievances was, if you want to engage in any dialogue with the Tiwi Islanders, you need to come to Tiwi country and you need to do things according to Tiwi cultural protocol. And similarly, there was a case in the Federal Court of Australia last year where the hearings actually took place on country in the Tiwi Islands. The judge went out there. It was done sort of next to this beautiful beach on very sacred land. And there's something quite powerful in sort of that kind of decolonization of the legal space. And on the other level, litigation can, of course, be a great tool to sort of raise the voices of those who don't conventionally get a seat at the table. And again, I can give you a couple of examples of sort of cases we've worked on. Sort of the most well-known case, I guess, is one where we represented young people who were represented by a litigation guardian who was actually a nun, Sister Bridget, and we represented them in suing the Australian Minister for Environment for failing, or rather, we allege that the minister owed a duty of care to future generations. And that this duty of care was enlivened anytime the minister had to make decisions about approving new coal mines or new sort of fossil fuel projects. And that case succeeded at the first instance, and it was overturned on appeal. But the impact was huge, right? Like one of the lead litigants in that case, Anjali Sharma, who was in high school at the time that we ran that case, she's now leading a campaign to turn the duty of care obligation into a legislative requirement. And there's a bill in place and there's lots of campaigning happening. And, there's been a number of cases around the world that are sort of based around this model of young people going to courts and trying to enforce their human rights. And often these young people are women and young girls. And it's incredibly powerful to see that kind of leadership, both amongst young people and young women. And we also had another case recently where another young woman, Kata O'Donnell, brought a case against the government of Australia, alleging that they needed to disclose the climate risks of their sovereign bonds. And the case settled, and the Australian government agreed that they would publish an acknowledgement that climate change poses a systemic risk to the value of bonds, which is, again, it has such a massive ripple impact on the economy and the way that people choose to purchase bonds and the way that risk is assessed. So it's definitely, litigation is one tool. It's not the answer, of course. But it can be used both to achieve hard outcomes while also, I think, giving space for a diversity of voices. to make their demands heard.
Thank you, Ms. Vidya. I think this part, the element of climate change litigation and the intersectionality that you beautifully highlighted is so important to that conversation. And the fact that you brought up like some concrete examples of case studies and lived experiences where that has, been a real issue, and how, women had overcome these barriers are also very important for all of us to understand the importance of the dialogue that we're having, but also to find inspiration in how we respond to certain situations. So really grateful for your input. And as a follow-up question to you, but also something for the speakers to reflect on, is why do you think global UN agencies feeling the hesitation to take new women refugees-led initiatives as partners? So we're talking about specific, women who might not necessarily be the typical women that you will see sitting around the table and engaging in this conversation. Why is that not, when you have all identified the importance of having the voices of refugee women around the table and be deeply engaged in this important conversation? What is going on? What do we think?
I'm happy to have a bite. I think part of the problem is, as you've highlighted, there's a bit of a siloing with the climate space, and the sense that it's crowded with scientists and sort of policy experts and economists, that it's a problem that's disconnected from people and their rights and their experiences. And it can, I think, I only entered the space like a year ago, and even I felt intimidated sort of with entering the climate justice space, because it seems there's all these reports and there's so much science and so much debate, and people get down to the nitty-gritty of, should we use carbon credits or should we use these types of systems? Whereas I think, sort of as you say, it should more squarely be an issue that is discussed with people of, particularly people from countries and from backgrounds that are likely to be deeply affected by the climate crisis and that are the least responsible for it, and people for whom I think there's a lack of resources being dedicated to literally just allow them to take the wheel and take the reins and provide solutions. So yeah, sorry, that's probably a long-winded answer.
Thank you. Great, Hippo. Any other thoughts from Amir, Ambrim?
I might just have a comment. Sorry. I think the problem generally it's that the system itself is just failing us as refugee leaders, as women refugee leaders, and so on. Just giving the example of COP28, which is just actually a few weeks from today. Like, access to the most affected and knowledgeable people to COP is not there. You try to apply and get badges to enter and have a proper discussion reflecting our challenge and our views is not there. So it's the system itself is just failing us in getting engaged in providing solutions that we believe that suits us the most. So I think in order to come over those challenges, we need to be united in our messaging while advocating for meaningful engagements of women refugee-led organizations or women organizations when it comes to climate. And thank you.
Many thanks. That's great. Any other thought, Ambrym, before I move on?
Yes, as I have observed over, like Vidya mentioned, a year or year and a half or so, COPs and high-level meetings and decision-making spaces are more and more focused on economic-centered approaches. And now is the time to focus more on human-centered approaches and bring in the human rights approach to solutions for climate justice. That is why we, I think, the term climate justice, we specified it when we were designing it with Anila, the whole project, that climate justice is a term that focuses and arises out of a human rights approach as opposed to economic-centered approach. And because this is the missing part in the puzzle to solve the climate crisis. And to bring the human rights and human-centered approach to the climate change discussions and decision-making spaces, I think we need to do what we are doing now. This is a contribution to those efforts to bring the voices from the communities who are experiencing the effects of climate change to the policies and inform the policies to be more human rights centered.
Indeed. Many thanks. And that, thank you very much to all our speakers. And that brings us beautifully to the second part of the conversation, which very much connects to already what has been highlighted by our wonderful speakers, and is that of moving from the transition of knowledge, which is hugely important, to actually looking at issues around funding. So how can we make funding more diversified and sustainable in terms of recipient of funding? How can we ensure that funding goes directly to the women and grassroots-led organizations who are often missed, but yet the most important key players as far as I'm concerned, and many of you would agree. I'm delighted to invite our first speaker to reflect on that question. Miss Onyeka Oluboji, I'm really sorry that I'm pronouncing your surname wrong, which I'm sure is a multiple award-winning conservationist, climate justice and an enthusiastic women's empowerment advocate, citizen journalist and a writer. She's also the founder and program director of Women Initiative for Sustainable Development, a grassroots-based nonprofit organization that promotes constructive environmental ideals by empowering women and young females to become environmental stewards, amongst many other things. Over to you, and a warm welcome from all of us on behalf of Women New Connectors.
Yeah, thank you so much, Amina. It's been great listening, to the other speakers. I'm so fascinated, by all the things I've been hearing. We're all echoing the same thing and talking about, the issue of climate change and how people with lived experiences are, practically cut off, from all the decision making, the solutions and everything that we have been hearing. I'll share a bit of my own experience because I like to make things very practical. But before I go on, I think when Amer was speaking, he was talking about challenges, centered around funding, access to funding, particularly for those who are the front lines of, driving solutions or people who are the most impacted. So when we are looking at the issue of gender equality, which is talking about equal opportunities for everyone, men, women, boys, and girls, we keep hearing all the time, even the United Nations Secretary General talked about how women remain the most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. But yet, when they're talking about the solutions and decision around the way forward, these same voices are missing. And then when you look at how funding is being channeled, of course, if these people are missing, then, the fundings that are available will possibly be misplaced in terms of where these funds end. And so I'd like to highlight that it is key that funding is socially inclusive by integrating sustainability strategies. And what I mean is talking about flexibility for funds. You find out that a lot of times you receive funds, sharing from my own experience, when you get funded for a particular project, it appears that the funder already has an idea without having a practical experience of what is actually going on. So it's either you end up not getting the funds because you want to tailor it, from a practical angle of what you understand is happening on the ground, which the funder doesn't know. And so if you are not echoing what the funder wants, you probably will miss it. And also when you want to echo, the actual needs on the ground, you find out that the funds that you've received is probably so restrictive and would not allow you, channel these funds to the actual needs of the people who have lived experiences. So I want to recommend that it's important that in putting up funds for interventions around climate change, it must be flexible and non-restrictive and tailored, needs tailored and also needs responsive, which means if you have funds, it must be tailored to the needs of the people who have the lived experiences, the people who are the most impacted, who are the most vulnerable, the people who are driving the solutions, in ways that come from their own knowledge. I think one of the speakers was centering on knowledge. And then you find out that most of the people who are deciding where funds should go, the solutions that should be driven, they don't even have the experience. And so I want to say that there are actually a lot of successful impact-centered interventions that can be scaled up or replicated. And if we have all these examples on the ground and yet it is not getting to the decision makers, then the gaps will continue to be there. So it's important that the voices of the people who are actually at the front lines of these issues, either driving solutions, coming up with innovative financing, funding, for interventions on the ground, must be amplified. It must become visible. And whatever is already successful that is making impact certainly must be replicated or scaled up at a global level. So I think I'll just stop here for now. Thank you.
That was a very powerful intervention, and many thanks, Onyeka. Absolutely, those who are frontline drivers need to be the ones who get access to this funding, and to make sure that the funders are engaging with people at a grassroots level. Very important to that conversation. I would like now to invite Miss Elsie Milan.
Hello.
Who is joining us all the way from Paris, as she is on her Paris Peace Forum. A warm welcome to you. She is chosen as the first Lebanese representative to the pre-COP 26. Congratulations. Elsie Milan was involved in the energy transition research since her MSc studies at the AUB. She's also been MT Climate Ambassador with the Global Youth Climate Network and the World Bank, amongst many other things. Huge warm welcome to you. And as you've heard our wonderful speakers, and on the reflection on our second session around sustainability and funding, over to you.
Hello, everyone. I'm so sorry. It wasn't planned that I will be in Paris, but it's always a pleasure to be with Anila and the team. Razan and Seyran are very dear to my heart, so I'm so happy to be here. So let's proceed. Okay, so when we talk about funding, as women coming from the South, it's very important to ensure that this fund is provided directly to us. I am lucky currently to have 2 funds to pursue my studies, and the way it works is that I get the funds directly. So I ensure that these are employed to the right causes. Can you
hear me? Very good. So that's the first thing. The second thing is reporting. Whenever we're using the fund, it's also very important to report that I used the fund like this. This is how I employed it. This is how I'm using it. This increases trust. And I feel like human relations, especially relations when we are, women coming from the South with their own initiatives, it's very important that we ensure that we are trusted. We build this relationship of trust, right? And this encourages us to use this fund and employ it for the causes that matter to us. So this is briefly how I see it. The question of funding is actually very, very important because nothing works without money, right? We need money to fund all our events, our projects, our ideas, but ensuring that the relationship of trust, working on the human level, is very, very important. Back to you, Amina, tell me. I see questions on your face.
I've been reflecting on your contribution.
I cannot hear you, actually. I don't know if I'm the problem.
I'm unmuted, so...
One second. So...
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Right, yes. I was saying that the face that you saw on your screen is one of inspiration for the work that you are doing on behalf of all of us, but also on the emphasis that you have put on in your contribution. So very much appreciated. And actually being on the move while joining us in this important conversation, that in itself is encouraging to the conversation from a different perspective. You action at work, fighting for the very cause that is, at the heart of today's dialogue. So a huge...
there's nothing we can do. And the beautiful ladies inspired me so much. So I really have to apologize actually for leaving. As you see, there's a lot of background noises. I have some engagements. Thank you so much. If there's any question that I can answer, I would really love to. And I hope to see you at COP 28. It's going to be amazing. Thank you so much. You inspire me every day. Anila, Seyran, and Razan. And I'm so happy to meet Amina now. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Elsie. So maybe whilst you still have that connection, if you have any comments and further contribution based on what you've heard in the little time that you've been part of this space, that's also an opportunity whilst your Wi-Fi is holding up.
Tell me. The space here?
Yes.
It's overwhelming. In one word. Everything is overwhelming, but there's nothing we can do. I think that's the only comment I can say. It's overwhelming, but there's nothing we can do.
I don't know if you've heard the contribution from our speakers. And,
yes, I heard that, and it was very inspiring to me. It was very, very inspiring to me. I was really looking forward to hearing the next, like the speaker after me, Ms. Christina, but as you know, I will have to break. I will have to leave. And thank you so much for the contribution, for the work you're doing.
Many thanks. And so
Thank you.
without further ado, then I would like to invite Christina Dexel, who's studied political science and international relations in Berlin, Germany, worked for the International Organization for Migration in Geneva and Berlin on the topics regular migration pathways, family reunification, and donor liaison. She started her work with the German Federal Ministry of Displacement and Migration, and her portfolio also includes climate-induced migration and internal displacement. So a warm welcome to you, and please, the virtual floor is all yours.
Thank you so much, Amina, and thank you so much also to Anila and Seyran and all the other colleagues for inviting me today. I'm very excited to have the opportunity to be part of this climate summit. I've heard a lot about this initiative and about the other summits you've already had, and we're very excited to be cooperating also with Anila and Seyran and New Women Connectors towards COP28. So yeah, thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this space. We've heard already a lot, which I think really builds up on each other. So all of the inputs that came before me, when we talk about that, we need to listen to and to include the knowledge and the expertise of the people that are most affected, both by climate change, but also by migration. And with a specific focus also on the gender dimension and women and girls. This obviously ties into the question of how can we ensure that funding and therefore also the instruments that are needed to get active and to change something, to become an agent of change, as we say, that those resources are reaching the right people that are most affected and that have this capacity to change something. So I think this is a really great setup for discussion already, and my previous speakers, I can only echo all of the points, and I will take many of the considerations back with me to the ministry as well. Coming from, as you said in my introduction, coming from the, let's say, more migration and displacement side, so I'm in the division for policy issues of displacement and migration, but then focusing on the interlinkage with climate change. I'm happy to share a few thoughts and also some maybe best practices, or let's say good practices, good first steps when it comes to more sustainable and more accessible funding. And yeah, happy to answer any questions. On the climate side, I might have to refer them back to some colleagues internally of my climate colleagues, but on the migration side, I'm sure I can answer much more already. So we know that there will not be any effective climate policy nor migration policy without gender equality. We need to take into account these power dynamics, the power structures, and that is one part or the central part really of the so-called feminist development policy that was announced by Germany, and also the feminist foreign policy. And those two policy frameworks really gave us, working in the ministries and others, great points to anchor our efforts to, because we can point to these frameworks and use them also as argumentation to change and to bring along change. There's still a lot to do, but there's already some promising efforts being done. So when it comes to financing, and this was said before, this includes, of course, that we have to adjust existing financial regulations, access criteria to existing financing instruments, for example, by including gender-specific criteria in results metrics or in evaluations. So there are already some points that can be done and that are starting to be included. And it was said already that one main barrier, though, is the access to these existing financing instruments. So it's very difficult, either because of very big administrative procedures that are needed in order to access funds, or the colleague before said because of the lack of flexibility of funding as well. So there's a lot that needs to be done. When it comes to BMZ, and specifically, I will start with the climate financing, and then I will move on to financing for human mobility in the context of climate change. But when it comes to climate funding and financing, there's a set of two main channels. One is via multilateral cooperation. So that includes multilateral funds and development banks, multilateral development banks. And then the other channel is via bilateral cooperation. And there much goes via our sort of, let's say, biggest partners in a way in the implementation field, GIZ and KfW, the German development agencies. But then also there's a proportion that goes directly to civil society organizations. And I think that is one aspect where we can get better as well, and where we can enhance our efforts to make more funding available directly to organizations that are working with the communities and within the communities that are most affected. So I would like to give two very short examples. There are many more. I talked to my climate colleagues before to get some insights from their perspective as well. And there is a few efforts already out there that I think are good practices that can be enhanced. One, the first example is the climate investment funds, CIFs, which are sort of under the umbrella of the multilateral development banks. And they have a program called the Nature, People and Climate Program, which is also supported by BMZ. And that program includes a dedicated grant mechanism in which, or in this stream of the program, indigenous and local communities can access direct funding to advance climate solutions. So here I think it pays tribute to the fact that these communities are the ones with the knowledge about the effects of climate change, but also with the expertise how solutions should look like for them and can look like. And therefore, this is one stream that I think is a good practice example where direct funding is being made accessible for these communities. The second example is also under this climate investment funds, the CIF, and it's called the Coal Transition Program. And within that program, there's a women-led coal transition mechanism. And here it gives direct financial support to local organizations, women organizations, and also organizations by other groups within the society that are in a marginalized position. And the aim is really to reduce the strong impact that climate change has on these communities and on the most marginalized groups in the first place as well. So that would be another example from that climate financing side. And I will finish my input with one more example from the human mobility in the context of climate change side, because we know that it's also a barrier and quite difficult to access funds that are specifically meant in order to deal with human mobility issues that are caused by climate change, or among other factors by climate change, such as displacement and also other forms of human mobility. And here we have a global program that is funded by BMZ and implemented by GIZ, a lot of acronyms, but by the German development policy, let's say. And that program focuses on human mobility in the context of climate change. And one aspect of the program is our cooperation with Fiji when it comes to voluntary and human rights-based planned relocations for communities that are situated in a site that is, due to climate change, not habitable anymore. And here, what they came up with is a trust fund for planned relocation. The Climate Relocation of Communities Trust Fund, or CROC, in Fiji was implemented via an act of legislation in 2019, I believe. And by now it is up and running, it's operational. They are still looking for funds, but what they achieved with this is a specific funding instrument just for human mobility issues in the context of climate change. And while I would say it lacks the aim of dispersing money directly to the people, but it's based on standard operating procedures and guidelines, which ensure that there is a contribution for women, children, and other marginalized groups, also including disability, for example. So there is a framework set up which makes sure that the funding is in benefit of such groups and cannot override such groups. So I think that is a first step of making funding more sustainable, because it deals with a specific issue that these communities are facing, mainly relocation. And a second step of making sure that there are safeguards that it actually benefits the people most affected and people in marginalized groups. While there is still room for improvement when we say funding should also go directly to the people themselves and not only be dispersed via, let's say, for example, government structures. So all of that to say, I think there are some good examples that we can build on and that we should promote. And there's a lot of room, though, for improvement to enhance such approaches as well. I'll leave it at that, but I'm very much looking forward to the conversation with you. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Miss Christina, and absolutely fantastic intervention on your part. I loved the premise in which you started your contribution around becoming agents of change and the acknowledgement of the gap, the current gap that exists as far as funding is concerned, and how certain groups are so much more affected than others, but as well as quite encouraging to hear that there has been quite some improvement around, you know, making certain funding available in order to enable some of the groups that you have identified in your intervention. You mentioned about the climate financing side, the human financing side. I love the different layers and the engagement with civil society and how important that is, but also on the trust and funding side of it, the climate investment fund, the trust fund, which was on your last comment, and those are the things that I think for those of us who've never heard about should really look into and tap into as we go forward, trying to, you know, to find practical solution that will enable us financially to make you know, some of the vision and the mission of you know, all the organizations and individuals who are present today, but also further afield. And so this is really bringing us almost to the end of our session, with the last session really focusing on more and having an interactive session with all of you as you reflect on the contribution and intervention by all of our speakers. As we think about the upcoming COP28, you know, what would you like that to be like? What kind of conversations, what kind of questions to be responded? Who needs to be around the table? Just some questions for you to reflect on. And for the speakers, think, what are your closing remarks? Think about what does, for instance, what does each one of you want us to take to the COP28, for those of us who will have that opportunity to go there with some practical examples of what a solution-based approach could look like. So in no particular order, I would love for those of you who are still here with us to respond to that, and then also for all the participants who've joined us, whether at a you know, a local, national or international level. You must have lots of important questions. So this is also your opportunity to put your questions to our speakers for the very few minutes that we have before I give the floor to Ms. Leela Noor to bring us to a close in a short little while. So, but I would like to now bring in our speakers, who just for you to think about what your closing remark and message that you would want us to take to COP28. I hope that most of you are with us. So in no particular order.
I think maybe we can start with the speakers that have recently joined us. Any of you who would like to share any of your closing remarks? As Amina mentioned, what does each one of you, as joining here today, providing us a lot of insights, and we would love to have sort of your takeaway from today. If you had one one sort of last simple take-ins. What does each of you who joined us as speakers today want for us to take to the COP? Maybe we can start with let's see, Umbreen, if you're here with us. I have a hand up. Fatu, please go ahead.
Hi everyone. My name is Fatu. I am from the Gambia, West Africa. I am a survivor of human trafficking. And I just want to say thank you because this link was shared by a friend in our group. We attended a retreat in Switzerland, me and her, and she shared it in our group, and I was interested and I joined in, but I really appreciate the conversation, and I hope it will be continued because I have a lot of experience and a lot of things that I want to share, but I think it cannot fit in all. But just to tell you, I am a survivor of human trafficking who stands against human trafficking. I work on migration and I sensitize, advocate, and raise awareness. I use my platforms like social media platforms, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, to advocate and sensitize the people. I have huge followers there, and that is where I start my advocacy, and I see that it is active and it's helping so many people, and so many survivors who are being trafficked online also do reach out to me, and we like I have also another experience that lead me to stay in Switzerland. I am currently in Switzerland, and I currently get my my papers to stay because of something happens to me in my country, like the government or the state arrested me after having a visa because they didn't want me to come because I will speak up when I come. Like, it's a long story to tell, but I just appreciate it, and I just want to say thank you, and I hope I will be also being invited in events like this or in meetings like this so that I can contribute. Thank you.
Can I just many thanks for your contribution, and I would really encourage for those of us, for those of you who are still with us and want to stay in touch as well, you know, put in the chat while you have that opportunity your name, your organization, where you're calling from. We very much would like to stay connected, to keep you updated with the fantastic work that we are doing, but to also hear about the incredible work that you are doing to change, you know, your communities as well. Is there anybody else with a question or a few seconds of a remark? Many thanks, Fatou.
See, there's a hand, Christina.
Oh, I am sorry. The email is wrong. It's fatujang 1989@gmail.com. It should be 1989@gmail.com. I will write again. Sorry.
Thank you. We had another hand up, I believe.
Yeah, we have two hands, Sifu and Christina.
Please, Sifu, over to you, and then Christina after, if that's okay.
Yes, thank you so much. And I think the conversations and the speakers that we had and the moderation as well were very good for today. So congratulations on that. And I think I wrote a bit of some comments in the chat, but maybe if any of the speakers would like to speak on the adaptation needs that need to be placed on top of the agenda for COP28. Maybe each one can give us one of the most dire adaptation needs that need to be placed, you know, at the top of the agenda for COP28. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot for giving me the floor again. I raised my hand mainly after you asked us for some closing remarks or something that, you know, we could take away or also send as a message for those attending COP28 soon, later this month. Actually, we're almost there. I think from the policy side, in a way. What I found that often helps when you want to bring across a certain need and a certain topic are these sort of very practical examples of either success stories where, for example, it can show the change and the potential when we actually give these resources and this access to funding to women-led organizations, to other civil society organizations, or communities themselves. And I think something like that can be extremely powerful because it breaks down a message that maybe keeps being repeated in policy circles, but the practical implementation of those is often still lacking. And then bringing these examples really helps to bring that message across. So I think that can be something very powerful in a big international forum such as COP, where already many of you mentioned, and something we also saw in our preparations for a side event, how difficult it can be, even if you have political will behind it. It's very difficult to make that access possible for many affected people, or for many activists as well. And I think, sharing these sort of success stories can be a powerful message. So anyone who has access to COP, I think this is a great goal and a great aim for their participation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other contribution, reflection, message as we think ahead of COP28? We have a huge task ahead of us, but I feel that as a collective, as powerful women who have a clear vision to bring about change, we can do it. But as many would say, that alone we fall, but together we stand strong.
I would like to share, Amina, that we from Seek Feminist Network, we will be at COP28. We are organizing a session with UNFCCC Capacity Building Hub at COP28, and the session is titled Refugee Women for Climate Action. And it is there that we plan to take the recommendations from our policy brief that we have prepared with inputs and recommendations from refugee and migrant women after months of deliberations and talks and sessions with them. Also, the CoFe Tables project has contributed to that, and we plan to take that to COP28. So hopefully for the next session, we'll have some maybe minor, maybe little, but some progress on inclusion of our voices and inclusion of the human rights perspective into the climate change discussions and debates at such an important space.
Indeed, thank you, Ms. Brim. That's very important, and I think that more of us should have that opportunity to be around the table. I know that at the moment many are questioning the reason as to why that's not the case. So we are really delighted that you will be representing the voices of many of the women who would love to be there but cannot be. Many thanks. Any other thoughts? How about our participants? What's if you were in that position to have a space around the table, what would be the message that you would want everybody to receive?
To hear us out, women are really vulnerable, and we definitely need our voices to be heard. We definitely need our voices to be heard, because, like example, people like me and other people like survivors who I am standing for, we feel like we are lacking behind, like because we are not involved, we are not putting in the positions where we can raise our voices, and whenever some of us or one of us is represented, we are not given the chance to speak up, to say what we want to say, or we are always being cut off, and sometimes we are even afraid to speak up. Like it affects us a lot, and I have the experience a lot. That's why, and I also see in the aspect of like I always see survivors even afraid, especially women, afraid to talk or afraid to say anything or afraid to be involved because they feel like they will always they will not listen to them, or they don't even care. I don't know. I don't know how to say it, but we feel like our voices is not being heard, and we want our voices to be heard. Yeah.
You're very well said. And as I listened to all the contribution, I was particularly thinking about the quote by Maya Angelou, who says that we may encounter many defeats, but we must not be defeated. And I know that many women would identify with that quote. Hence the reason for convening this important conversation, and all the supporters of this wonderful event who are right there standing and walking alongside with you where you might be needed. And this is why we need to all be connecting as much as we can, and to exchange our knowledge, our skills, our experiences, in order to be able to go forward with some practical examples of finding solution, and then being able to contribute that around the table that we have been speaking about. So as we are now coming to a close, I would really like to give the final words of remarks to no other than Miss Anila Noor, and just to say that on behalf of Initiative of Change Sustainable Communities Programme, we are just very delighted that we could be a part of that, and to support you in this journey collectively. So over to you, Miss Alina.
Thank you, Amina. Thank you so much for your amazing work. It was really joyful to having you to moderate this session. I just want to conclude by saying that it's hard. Yes, we heard the frustration, the tiredness. We are feeling overwhelmed. What's actually happening right now? We can't close our eyes and ignore those elements, which is happening right now. What's happening in Gaza? What has in Palestine? What's happening in Sudan, Afghanistan? And then we have more than that, the nature is changing. We are changing. So that's why it's very important to make this kind of spaces, this kind of safe spaces, this kind of talk where we can listen to each other and don't feel alone. This is the main purpose of having this discussion. We have lack of funding when it comes to resources, but we don't have lack of confidence, lack of stories, lack of environment, empowerment, which we can. And that's why one of the question which came from Sefu, I think she said we really need to talk about adaptation. And I think adaptation is about how we can adjust and restructure, rechange, make a more systematic change in our social life, our ecology, our social economical system. And that's what we are advocating for. We are advocating for systematic change. We're really advocating how we can have a control, and we have that not only seat on the table, but that decisions in our hands. So it's really not gonna happen until we have the right to enter those spaces. As few of you know, even in getting the badges to the COP is becoming so much difficulty for us. So that's why we are coming of the idea how we can come up our recommendation, which we are generating our policy recommendation, and we are using this digital and in-person small to bigger spaces where we advocating like nothing about us without us, and we really want to work together. I can't say enough how much I'm happy to be part of this discussion and to take the lead. As one of the participants said, it's not easy even to have reflection as a person of a different background, as a person of coming from South Asian culture, as a person of a brown skin, it's not easy sometimes. Being a woman, it's not easy to even to talk about, and sometimes we really feel we are screaming, but no one is listening. So it's very important when we are going, we go together, we create solidarity, and we want to put the solution as a follow-up, not to have only one event to two events. We really want to make a structure, a system, and accountability on the name of social justice. We really need action now. Thank you so much, everyone, and hands over to Seran for the next step. And thank you so much from my side.
Thank you so much again to all of you. Feeling the empowerment, but also seeing how much we need to start even continue this work. We want to have a seat at the table of the climate discussions, and this is why which we made coffee tables. This is why we started our project working with this. Our aim has been to gather our speakers, our audience, that also have been part of our previous coffee tables talks for our last discussion, in which we really want to gather all the inputs and want to bring this for the COP. We know that women across the world who are the first to experience climate change are also first responders, often are underrepresented, and from grassroots organizations. I don't know, but I definitely feel that here in this space, I've heard so many stories, but also wonderful inputs in very important parts from all of our speakers that I've learned, but also I think this is continuous learning, because it's a space that definitely we need to understand more, but also coming from our traditional knowledges and to understand it within our own contexts. I thank all of you for joining here today, and I think we can bring up the brochure again to provide a few information about how you can also continue to follow us. We will, as mentioned, we will be taking all of your inputs for the COP with us. You can find more information in the link. I also shared it now in the chat. We will bring them there for the COP, and we will also represent these voices that are often not heard at these spaces. We will provide the details in the chat for any contact. You can reach out to me, Anila, and we will send out also the details about it, which is in our website. So again, I restate how we started today, and that is we are here to talk about feminist leadership for climate justice. And this is an initiative that includes all of us, and that we're all going to partake in. So I hope with this that it's been a good event for all of you, and that you've learned as much as I've learned as well, and that you will continue to join us, because it is really important that we share this space together and that we partake in the dialogue. And with that, I think as well, Anila, without anything further, if you want to add some final events that we're in for a close. So thank you so much to all of you who joined us today. Feel free to reach out to us. We are with the New Connectors, and you'll find information in the chat as well. So thank you for today. It's been wonderful to have all of you with us.